Hey guys, Paul here. So I've got a fun divisive question for the class today. When should a Yu-Gi-Oh card be banned? And it's an interesting question because to be more specific, I'm talking about what determines when a card should get hit outside of the obvious case. So the obvious case would be, let's say earlier this year with Kashtira Arise Heart. It's an easy example, I reach for it a lot. This is a card that pretty much warped the format around itself. Certain cards just could not be played, and you had to have an answer to Kashtira Rise Heart. If your deck couldn't deal with the walking macrocosmos thing, then you probably couldn't play. I think everybody sort of agreed for a long time that Kashtira Rise Heart was probably just going to have to get banned. It was the problem, so to speak, and so when it got banned, most people seem to be like, yeah, that pretty much had to happen, right? Okay, cool. But what about the decks and cards where it isn't exactly so obvious? Well, the card that made me think about this entire video to begin with was actually Mathmech Circular getting banned on the most recent TCG ban list. This one was a bit confusing for people because it sort of feels like, well, okay, Mathmech Circular is definitely an overtuned card, right? It does way too much on its own, and that's not really up for debate. I mean, like, literally the card sends from deck as a Goss and starts combos and blah, 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 blah. But, the Mathmech deck was not actually winning events, right? It was barely even actually getting representation at events. Mathmech Circular was limited to one before now, and that alone seemed to pretty much, deter people from even really playing the deck a whole bunch in competition just because of the consistency issue there. But it got banned anyway, and so people were just sort of like, huh, weird, okay. Like if you're a Mathmech player, that feels especially vindictive from Konami. And so I was like reading what people thought about this, and yeah, most people were confused, but some people were saying, well, okay, Mathmech Circular, even though it was not getting representation, it still needed to be hit just because of the toxic or degenerate card design, which is, like that's always going to be kind of a buzzword, right? Toxic, degenerate, that can mean anything that you don't like. But it did make me think, is that a reason for a card to get hit? Even if it's not being played, just the fact that it is really strong or something, or maybe limits future card design, that's something that you hear kind of come up a bit. Should that mean that a card gets hit? And that's where I want people's opinions because I think that there is not a right or wrong answer to this. And I do think that Konami probably just considers a little bit of everything when it comes to ban lists. Um, in fact, just to dispel that really quickly, I think like the community, if you played Yu-Gi-Oh long enough, you pretty much know the types of people that will say things like I know when Konami is going to hit a card. I know what Konami thinks with ban lists. Oh, they always hit these type of cards. They hit the consistency cards, or they only hit the combo starters, or they never hit like floodgates or there's all these different sort of thoughts that people have about like the ban list rules. But the honest truth of it, in my opinion at least, is just that they kind of hit stuff as they see fit, and that could mean any number of things. It could be to sell a product. It could be to spite you. There's just no telling, right? But in this case, though, I wanted to talk about, like, when a card is not an obvious threat, but it still seems like it's getting hit on a ban list, like, what do you think of that? Is there a time and place where that's necessary? Um, an example that I've always kind of given is like the Adventure Token engine from a couple years back. That was a really ubiquitous engine. Everybody ran it. It was really strong, but it never actually got hit, despite the fact that people thought that it would. It even got hit in the OCG, but the TCG didn't hit it. What was it exactly that they felt was the justification for that? I mean, as it is now, nobody really plays the engine. It's a lot more niche, and people just kind of seem like they've moved on, so you don't hear anybody complaining about it. So does that mean that it was fine all along, or does that mean that people just adapted? Like, what was the situation there? Do you guys think that it should have gotten hit? And if it got hit then, would it have been fine to like bring it back now? It's kind of hard to say because it actually feels like in a way it might as well have gotten hit and then gotten brought back because of the way it's being played today. It seems like it doesn't really make a difference, if that makes any sense. But let's go with some more specific card examples. Like for instance, you take the pot cards. These are ones that are, they've gotten a lot of talk lately, right? Your pot of desires, your pot of extravagance, your pot of prosperity in particular. A lot of, players, especially the more competitive players, seem to really kind of have it out for pot of prosperity. Not saying I agree or disagree, but it seems like the argument that I read a lot is that pot of prosperity provides too much consistency and digs too deep to let you see the most useful cards almost all the time. So, drawing 2 is already really good, but actually digging 6 deep into your deck to get the exact combo starter you need, or the exact board breaker you need, or even like say a triple tactics card, that is really, really strong. And so some people think that pot of prosperity should be hit. But other people would probably disagree. Like, I think like a maybe more casual or intermediate level player might find that the pot cards are great because they give consistency to a lot of rogue decks. Pot of Desires and especially Pot of Extravagance seem like they're really, really popular for, more control decks or just like rogue strategies, because these are sort of the decks that like need that extra consistency push, and they're not really winning anyway. And so when they lose a pot card, like for instance in Master Duel, where they've been really kind of attacking all the pot cards and putting them all at one and stuff, it's like, what's that about, So those are ones that I kind of wanted to know, like, what do people think about it? Do pot cards deserve to get hit because the top tier decks use them too well? Do they deserve to get hit because just Yu-Gi-Oh in general values, just the value of a single card can be so high? Or do you think that the pot cards are fine and that maybe the issue cards themselves should be the ones getting hit? Like, it's not the pots that are the problem, it's the one card starters or, the super powerful board breakers, right? Another concept too is like, should decks have shelf lives? I've brought this up before, and I'm always curious what people think about it because, cards and decks and stuff come out, and it sometimes feels like when 6 or 9 or especially 12 months pass, people are like, okay, when is this deck going to get hit? Like, this deck, it's due for a ban list hit. There's kind of this unanimously agreed, well, I say unanimously, this unspoken rule that a deck will, get like about 6 to 9 months in the spotlight, and then that's where you need to start like selling your cards because it's probably going to get hit on the ban list soon. I'm not so sure that that's really like held up a lot over the years. It feels like it was more prevalent like 5 years ago, let's say. These days, it's a little bit harder to tell. But do you think that just because a deck has existed for 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, is that like a valid reason for it to get hit? Some people bring that up when it comes to like the branded deck, right? The branded deck has existed and been a pretty like high tier threat for basically 2 years now. I mean, really. And some people want it to be hit, but the TCG in general has not really hit the deck. I mean, like Branded Fusion and stuff is like still at 3, and all their best cards are still at 3. Master Duel has hit the deck at least, but then like when it gets hit in Master Duel, some people are like, oh, it doesn't deserve to get hit that badly. Think about those poor branded players. So when a deck has been around for a long time, is that alone enough of a reason for the deck to get hit? And I ask that also because when I make banlist prediction videos and stuff like that, that's where the people really come out of the woodwork. Like, people get pretty angry. They're like, why are you insinuating that my deck should get hit? It didn't do anything, or it shouldn't get hit just because it's been around. That's not a good enough reason. So, but then there's like another crowd I know that is very like, I'm tired of seeing this deck. I'm tired of seeing this card. Like, this deck annoys me. It's been around for so many months. It's getting stale. So should the ban list exist to kind of keep things fresh and hit things that are stale? And man, this is just like, there's a whirlwind of thoughts in my head. Then it brings up that whole thing about like, Konami, should they hit like new cards, old cards, they just use the ban list to sell product thing. Because I've actually heard a really common double standard a little bit here, where people will say, oh, Konami's just using the ban list to sell product, push new product on us, and force you to play the new thing. And so that's why like they won't hit the new stuff, they'll only hit the old stuff. But it's like, if they were to hit the new stuff, and there have been a few cases in recent like months where they've hit the new stuff quite soon after release, does that like, people get pretty mad about that, right? Like, people don't like when they hit the super heavy samurai deck like the moment it got released. It only got a few months in the spotlight and then it got hit. So that was a case of Konami not really promoting new products and instead hitting something really immediately because they felt that it was a problem. And typically that seems like what people don't want them to do, but then it's like they also kind of do want them to do it. So like, when is or isn't it okay? So yeah, I know this video is a little bit all over the place, but I just raise these questions because I think that as Yu-Gi-Oh players, it's so easy to just be upset with ban list hits or confused or just like, Konami sucks, right? This new ban list sucks or whatever. But I think that we have to dig a little bit deeper and think, okay, why did they hit cards, and what is it that we are or aren't okay with being hit in a game? Like, what really makes for the best game balance? Should you be hitting new versus old cards? Should you hit a card just because it allows too many decks to use it? Should staples be getting hit? Should Barone get hit just because it's a little too good? Or is it like, well, maybe the combo decks themselves need to get hit? What about stuff like floodgates? What about stuff like hand traps? What about things like board breakers? Like, where do you stand on ban list hits in general? Try to separate yourself from an individual ban list hit and think more broadly, right? Like, what are the general factors that determine when a card should get hit? And then, of course, keep in mind that it's still going to be a case-by-case thing. And, yeah. Okay. Sorry, this one was a bit off the dome, so hopefully it made some sense, and hopefully people just can give some insights in the comments. I will certainly be reading. I love to hear people's thoughts on Yu-Gi-Oh! Have you found yourself, the victim of a banlist hit that seemed unwarranted? Or have you even seen a banlist hit that everybody else agreed was unwarranted and you're just kind of like, no, that actually makes perfect sense. Okay, so that's going to be it. I'll see you guys in the next one. Best turn.